Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video I'm going to be creating the best NBA team that I possibly can with only players that have not made an all-star team to this point in their careers. Now I've done this a couple of times in the past with a few different criteria, a lot of those related to either the salary cap or the luxury tax, but in this video it's all about all-star selections, or in this case, a lack of them. First up in the starting lineup is a relatively obvious one, and it's Mike Conley at the point guard spot. He has famously never made an all-star team to this point in his career, despite being one of the better point guards in the league throughout his career. He's not necessarily the flashiest guy, not gonna put up gigantic numbers, though he has had some really good statistical seasons. He just hasn't managed to break through and become an all-star, but he's someone that for this team specifically is going to fit really well because this is generally a very young team. He provides a nice veteran presence. He's someone that is more of a playmaker than a scorer, and a lot of the other guards in this lineup or on this team are primarily scorers and shot takers, and he's a guy that can set the table for other players and, like I said, be a steadying veteran presence. So he was a no-brainer in the starting lineup for me. Next up was actually a pretty tough one because there's a lot of really good young guards in the NBA that haven't quite broken through and become all-stars yet, but personally I'm going to go with Devin Booker. And like I said, there's other options that you could certainly put here, and I'm sure some of them are going to be on this list later, on this team later, but for me, Booker is the most talented player to put here, especially alongside a guy like Conley because of his ability to play on or off the ball as a playmaker or as a shooter. Obviously not an outstanding defender, but that's going to be something you're going to be seeing throughout this list and something that I'll cover at the end. But Booker is just someone that provides a ton of talent and scoring and shooting, and on a team like this, you have to have guys that can space the floor even when they don't have the basketball, and Booker certainly fits that mold. Like I said, this can be an arguable position in my opinion at least. You could certainly argue to put someone else in here, but I went with Booker. Next up is the first of a handful of international guys on this team, and it's going to be Luka Doncic at the 3 spot. And I put him here for a couple of different reasons. One, same thing like I just talked about with Booker and a little bit with Conley, his ability to play on or off the ball. He's someone that can be a really good playmaker with the ball in his hands, or he can space the floor and shoot off of it. Doesn't necessarily need the ball to impact things positively on the offensive end, which is going to be a trend on this team because there's only one ball to go around to a lot of really talented players, despite none of them having made an all-star team yet. I understand it's maybe a bit of a leap to have Doncic in the starting lineup of this group in just his second season or going into his second season, but his size, his versatility, his playmaking, in my opinion, make him an easy choice. And now we move on to the 4 spot, and I'm gonna go with Lauri Markkanen of the Chicago Bulls. And again, you definitely could make a case for some other players here, but Markkanen's ability to space the floor and be a really good scorer, provide size at the 4 spot, ultimately put him over the top of some of the other guys on this list. Now, lineup-wise, you could certainly replace him with some other people that I'm going to talk about later if you need a little bit more of a defensive presence at that point, or at that spot at least, because that is something that Markkanen certainly still needs to work on, but he's a great floor spacer, and when you see who I picked at the 5 spot, you'll see why I definitely needed a floor spacer at the 1 through 4 spots, and can do a little bit of post scoring as well, and is more of a scorer than just an all-out shooter, and just fits really nicely into this lineup, in my opinion, and is another international selection. And now we get to the 5 spot, and my choice is going to be Rudy Gobert, primarily because he is such a good rim protector and defender, and the other 4 guys I have in this lineup aren't really very good defenders at all. Conley's probably the best one, but the other guys to this point in their careers have not shown to be very good defenders at the NBA level at all. They do have good size, but not necessarily defensive prowess, and Gobert should be able to make up for a lot of the mistakes at the rim in that circumstance. He should be able to block a lot of shots and make up for a lot of the other mistakes that these guys are making, in addition to really not needing the ball a ton to create offense or to score. He's mostly just going to be an offensive rebounder, garbage points kind of guy rolling to the rim. He's not going to demand a ton of touches offensively, which is good because a lot of these other guys certainly are going to need touches to stay engaged and to be effective. So Gobert, in my opinion, was a pretty simple choice at the 5 spot, although you could probably technically go with someone that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in a similar kind of role. But for now, that's going to be the starting lineup. We're going to go Conley, Booker, Doncic, Markkanen, and then Gobert. And now we get to the bench, and I think this is actually one of the strong suits of this team, is how deep they are and how talented they are coming off the bench, and how you can really plug and play a lot of these different guys into the starting lineup and really not miss a beat. But the first player off the bench, the first guard off the bench for me, is going to be DeAaron Fox, who might end up making the Team USA team here within the next couple of days. Apparently he's been playing extremely well for them, had a really good second season, is just someone that can provide a change of pace when Mike Conley comes off the floor. Conley is more of a steady presence, someone that's going to make plays for others, while Fox is just an absolute speedster, can go up and down the floor, really push the pace, and just be a complete change of pace like I talked about from what Conley will be able to provide at the point guard spot. Not an outstanding shooter, so would probably need to be the primary ball handler, which is another reason that he's coming off the bench here. He doesn't fit quite as well as an on or off ball player as Conley does among those other guys in the starting lineup that are probably going to need the ball a little bit to be effective, like Doncic and Booker, and to a certain extent Markkanen as well. So in my opinion, Fox works a little bit better off the bench here just because he isn't as good of a shooter to this point in his career as Conley, but still an outstanding player to have coming off the bench. Next up is an international player that maybe you didn't think about at first because there's so many really good young players that could have made this team, but I'm going to go with Danilo Gallinari as someone that provides size at the 3 and 4 spots, a 20-point per game scorer last year, a really good shooter, and just someone that can score in maybe different ways than some of these other guys. Doesn't need to do a ton of stuff in ball screens and can just come off of off-ball screens and shoot off the ball, get to the mid-range a little bit, maybe work a little bit in the post, can still attack the rim, but again, just provide something a little bit different because you don't want to be too redundant. You don't want to just have the most talented players you can possibly have and then all to be doing the same things and not really have anywhere else to go if those kinds of things aren't working. So Gallinari is a good option for me at this point, someone that provides size and again, just does some things a little bit different offensively than a lot of the other players on this list and can play either the 3 or the 4 spot. Next up now is a guy that maybe some of you expected to see in the starting lineup in place of Lauri Markanen, and that is Pascal Siakam, the most improved player from last year, a really important piece of the Raptors winning a championship, and you can certainly make the case that he fits better in that starting lineup than Markkanen does. From a defensive standpoint, as a two-way player, someone that can do more than just score like Markkanen can, around all of the other guys on the starting unit that are so good offensively already, most notably Conley and Booker and Doncic, yes, he fits well with them, but I just decided to go with more of the spacing that Markkanen provides and the scoring that Markkanen provides, and then Siakam can kind of be plugged and played in there depending on the matchup or the lineup or whatever you need during the game, playing either the 4 or the 5 spot as a little bit of a better defender than Markkanen. You can't really go wrong by starting either of those guys. It was just a personal preference for me to have spacing around the other 3 really talented perimeter ball handling, playmaking, scoring players that I talked about in Doncic, Booker, and Conley. Which brings us to another player that you probably could have made a case to be in the starting lineup, and this one is at the 5 spot, and it's Clint Capela. He would play a very similar role to what Rudy Gobert would do for this team as a rim protector, as a shot blocker, as a rim runner, as an energy guy, an offensive rebounder, a hustle points guy. It just comes down to the fact that I think Gobert is a much better player at this point than Capela. More consistent, does more defensively because he has just proven to be a better defender over the last couple of years than Capela. That's not a knock on Capela, just player for player. I would pick Gobert as my starting 5 over Capela, but you can't really go wrong here. They're both going to be able to do similar things, and these are the kinds of 5s that you really want on these kinds of teams because you're already going to have so much perimeter and scoring and playmaking and ball handling talent that you're going to want someone that is not really going to need the ball a ton and is going to be really effective and helpful for your team in other ways than just scoring, and both Gobert and Capela certainly fit that bill. Again, I would just pick Gobert in the starting unit over Capela. Moving on now to maybe a bit of a surprising choice, but the reason I went here and the reason that I chose Aaron Gordon of the Orlando Magic is just because I feel like this team needs a little bit more two-way versatility and someone that can be a little bit more of an athlete and a defender on the wings because we're a little bit light on wings, which I'll talk about at the end. He's not going to be a 20-point per game scorer on this team, judging by all of the other guys that are already, on this roster, but that's not really what you're going to be asking of him anyway at the 3 or the 4 spot, and maybe even the 5 spot in certain lineups or against certain matchups. Someone that isn't necessarily an outstanding defender, but provides athleticism and strength and size and versatility, and can match up relatively well with some of the better wing players around the league, which in my opinion, once I looked up and down the roster, was certainly something that this team was missing, which is why Gordon is on this team. Next up though, we get to another really talented guard, and maybe you're thinking, why in the world did it take so long to get to this guy? And it's Donovan Mitchell of the Utah Jazz. This is the 3rd different Jazz player, by the way, that's going to be on this team, and Mitchell will probably end up being an all-star this year, and you certainly could make the case that honestly he should be a starter over Devin Booker, that I should have mentioned him before. Now, the bench roster isn't necessarily in order, it's just guys that I wanted to talk about as a part of this bench. Mitchell is another really good playmaker, on and off ball player, can play the 1 or the 2, fits really well alongside any of the other guards on this roster, and it's no disrespect to him that I mentioned him this late in the video, and a lot of the things that he brings are similar to what I talked about with the other guards earlier. I would just rather have Booker because he is a better shooter in the starting lineup over Mitchell, but I completely understand if you disagree with that and would rather have him in your starting lineup. Last up now, another really talented guard, and it's Zach LaVine of the Chicago Bulls. Coming off the season that he just had, I couldn't really go away from him here. Statistically, he had a really good season scoring-wise, and he's just another really talented on and off ball player that can shoot, provides a little bit more size at the guard spots than maybe someone like Mitchell, and I couldn't leave him off of this group from a talent perspective. He maybe doesn't provide that much of a different skill set than some of the other guards that I've already talked about, specifically the younger ones, but I couldn't leave him off. Just as from a sheer talent standpoint, I could not have Zach Lavine on this team. And as you look at the roster as a whole, there are a couple of issues here. One, defense is not going to be very good at all outside of the 5 spot. We're going to be able to score the ball a lot, but we don't really have a really good wing defender to put on some of the better players around the league, which is why maybe you could make the case to put someone like Marcus Smart on the roster or something like that, a guy that's not an all-star but is going to be able to defend really well. Because when you're looking at it, I mean, Aaron Gordon, maybe Donovan Mitchell, maybe Doncic, maybe Gallinari, just from a size and strength standpoint for at least 3 of those guys, maybe those would be really good defenders. I mean, Conley can probably still guard a little bit, but he's getting up there in age. So that's definitely going to be an issue. And I think we're a little bit heavy on guards and don't have as many wings, but really there just weren't a ton of choices for me personally as I was looking around in terms of really good two-way wings. I even considered putting someone like Jonathan Isaac on this team, again, just as someone that provides size and versatility, but in the end, I did still want to have as much talent as possible, and that's kind of where I went instead of going for guys like Marcus Smart or Jonathan Isaac. You could certainly put on here to improve this team's defense. But yeah, there you have it. That is my best NBA team that I could put together with only players that have yet to make an all-star team to this point in their careers. As always, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below if there's anybody that you feel like I missed, any glaring omissions from this team, and or your own personal team made up of only NBA players that have yet to make an all-star team. But that is going to be the end of today's video. I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.